Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I am here with a fintech expert. I have Michael Cassidy, who is the managing partner of M&G Solutions. How you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I met Michael through RMAI, through our interactions at the association, his participation in, I believe it was the membership committee, and just being an active advocate for the association. So for those of you that are constantly hearing me talk about, hey, if you want to actually get value from your memberships with various associations, get involved, Michael here is the perfect example of how to do that effectively.
Yeah, it's I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to get involved, and I think it's one thing to hear about it, but when you actually do get involved and see the people that are on the other side, they're in the membership committee, people, donating their time to our industry, it's awesome. So
really does make a huge difference. And I know that you've got a significant amount of experience in the fintech banking technology, right? Like, you're just such an interesting guy. That's why I really always enjoy a good conversation with you. But for those that are watching that are not familiar with you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. Yeah, I think my path is probably similar to a lot of folks in this. I think I'm approaching my 20th year in the, call it, financial services space. That started, as my father would call it, my accidental career out of college and joining a law firm that was focused on the lovely world of medical lawsuits, medical debt collection. So going from there to the Juniper and Barclays days, about 7.5 years at a credit card large issuer, insource, outsource, really getting a feel for just the inner workings of this space. And that was really that first realization that this is actually this is something, this is more than the bill collector and the concept that I think a lot of folks have, when you're looking at externally. So really just got an opportunity to jump in and went from there and tested things out on the servicer side. I don't think you can truly appreciate it or say you appreciate it until you're on the other end of that table, and go out on the agency side, which I did for about 2.5 years and ran US ops for an agency. That eventually led me to the fintech space. I was fortunate. I was given an opportunity to help build out the collection function at a large online installment or fintech lender in the Bay Area. I probably should have asked at least 2 more questions than I did when I accepted it. And I learned really quickly that, certainly on the fintech side, when they say, do you want to build out collections and recovery, they might actually mean it, and you should probably be prepared to do that. So that was my entry into this fintech space, and really just, starting from the heart of the collections to some time on the card issuer side, BPO, and found my way into fintech.
And circled back into fintech. I love it. So now you are the managing partner for M&G Solutions. So can you tell us a little bit about the organization and what you guys do there?
Yeah, sure. M&G was really born out of that experience at a fintech lender. Our thought in that life cycle, if you will, building it out, was, hey, the opportunities, what was unique about fintech, the opportunities that they faced, the challenges they faced, weren't unique to the company I worked at. And really, our thought was, myself and now my partner, who was actually on the BPO side, as he helped me build out the outsourcing. Mm-hmm. Our thought was, this has to be repeatable. We had countless conversations with my peers at the time, and our belief was, these problems aren't unique to the lender. The solution is probably repeatable, regardless of the asset class. And there's an opportunity, and that's really what we did with building M&G. So we call ourselves a niche consulting firm. So we work with predominantly fintech or the newer lenders, online installment. We've done everything from online installment, medical installment, subprime card, solar lease and finance, supply chain finance, which took some Googling on my part to figure out what I got into. But really what we found was like our use case and what we set out to do from servicing perspective, which is where we focus on the post origination. It doesn't matter if it was supply chain finance or subprime card, the back end of how you service it, what you do post
Mhm.
origination, very similar. And that's what we've gone out and set to do is how can we help these companies mature? How can we help them build out a servicing framework that looks and feels like a bank or like something similar? Yeah, and it's been fun. It's not a small undertaking. If we set out to do it thinking, oh, I won't have a boss, I've got 7 or more at any given time. So it's been fun.
Completely understood. So it's never easy to start your own organization. We all kind of know that one at this point. But let me ask you this, right? So as we look at, as somebody who's got experience with both the large card issuer and then kind of being in that fintech startup space, which has been, just a exponential growth area for the past couple of years, talk to me about the differences there. Like, how does the big bank and the fintech differ?
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot of ways they differ, and then I'll even touch on there's a lot of ways that they're really more similar than I think
Okay.
we initially realized. The first part of how they differ, depending on the asset we're talking about, the back end structure is often the biggest differentiator.
Okay.
The underwriting. Is there a bank partner that's actually the original creditor or the originator? There's more likely to be some transfer of that asset post origination. So the company, the fintech lender that you're talking to, is less likely to be the balance sheet lender, the true owner of that debt.
Okay.
That creates complexity from a servicing perspective, from a chain of title. So oftentimes the how they differ is really sits behind the walls. On a really positive side for the fintech, one of the many reasons why they're growing is they're nimble. I mean, they are leveraging technology differently than a bank is. It's not because the bank doesn't have the capability. They just may have a longer cycle to be able to test into new
Mhm.
strategies. So the nimbleness of the fintech is really what makes it different from the servicing perspective. The nuance of what is the back end is a huge driver of it. The other one is really because of where they are in a life cycle. Um, they're very top of funnel focused. So if you want to be a new lender, you need a book, you need marketing, you need customers, you need all of that investment on the top end. So it's you're managing with less oftentimes. But the similarities that I mentioned I think are just as profound. I mean, when you look at these online and fintech lenders, the underwriting is, it ends up following a lot of the same principles, right? They may have more internal modeling, but they're going to leverage a lot of the traditional data attributes. So I do think there's a lot of similarities that maybe isn't appreciated as much. The same controls, the same rigor around underwriting. A lot of them they're maturing themselves. You're seeing some of the two or more of the biggest ones have acquired banks. So I think the lines are blending. I think
Okay.
uh, they may differ in a lot of ways. I do think the lines are blending.
Do you think it's more just like the startup environment, right? Like it's a heavier leveraging on technology. They're not, whereas a major bank is coming from like JP Morgan, right? Like bank's been around over 100 years. Like it takes time to turn around a steamship, right?
Yeah.
Like or a cargo ship. Like it takes time to maneuver. And then you've got these fintechs coming in and these little speedboats, right? Little scarabs running around, and they're able to turn a lot quicker, right? They're able to about face a lot quicker. They're able to test things in a less um, required environment. And then also the responsibility to shareholders. You got a major bank, and they're constantly having to go through the process of being evaluated, right, as an organization. And if they're not going to grow their dividends and they're not going to grow their returns to investors, like it's just treated differently than an organization that maybe has some private investors that are going to have a different risk tolerance level in terms of the overall operations of the business. Now, we could talk about risk tolerance between what a bank is willing to lend and what a fintech is willing to lend and how realistic those guidelines are. But like, do you think that maybe it's got something to do with like who the master is at the top, right? Like shareholders in Wall Street versus private equity and private capital?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you talk about the startup. Yeah, there's this proving out velocity of growth is a huge factor, right? They have
Mhm.
to get, to sustain valuations, to really get to their end state, whatever it might be. They have
Mhm.
to grow. They have to prove just continuous growth. To do that, yeah, you are leveraging technology. You're moving at a faster clip than a bank would, for again a lot of the reasons you just said. So I do think that plays a role in it. I do think it's important. Kind of drawing a line back to that, where they align with some of the banks is there are in most cases still a bank and very likely a highly regulated bank involved. That you look at, that originating bank is likely very much involved, and that's a lot
Okay.
of our clients. We always say we'll come in and help, build out servicing operations as if this were a bank. You're often pitching that to their bank
To the
partner.
bank.
So they're like, well, thanks. We would appreciate that because we're regulated. We would like you to operate like we do. So I do think that's true. I think on the top of funnel in particular, how quick they can grow, how quick they need to grow, I should say. That is that startup mentality. Servicing is where I always get back to. It's like all things become sort of equal. You have to protect the book. You have to demonstrate control. You have a consumer experience. You have regulations. You have all of it, and it doesn't matter how it was originated behind you. Servicing is servicing.
So are the two different types of organizations, being banks versus fintechs, going after different consumers, or are they ultimately cannibalizing themselves, like cannibalizing each other for the same consumer?
Yeah, it's the same very large pot. They're all
Okay.
operating in. So it's, there's so many different products, and we all talk, fintech. You have you've just got a wide array. The buy now, pay later, or the pay in four are going to be one. Yeah, that's very much your retail, your online retail. That's going to be a lot of it. But that's the same. That's not a new product, right? So I think it's a lot of cannibalization. Like that's been out there a long time. It's a
Sure.
newer look. The UI is probably way better, but it's not a new concept. So
Okay.
it
Okay.
is
Makes
very much the
sense.
same space, in my opinion.
So in other words, it's a lot of it is a new face or a new
Yeah.
look to the same,
Yeah.
beast, so to speak, right? Like it's a car's getting a new paint job, looks a lot nicer. Maybe swapped out the interior, put in some bucket seats and made it feel a little more modern. It's almost like a like think about it in terms of car restoration. There's like a resto mod, right? Like versus restoring to the original, they're trying to modify it to be a little bit more in tune with the tastes of the time,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah. But that consumer is still going to have their likely to have, let's word it that way, likely to have a primary card with a major issuer. They're likely to
Mhm.
have their auto loan at any of your traditional, lenders. So I think it really is. It's another solution for the same consumer.
Would you predict seeing more fintech starting to move more into that bank deposit, right? Like and becoming more like deposit banks over time? I think it was when Ally first came out, they were like, we're going to be the non-bank bank or something like that, and it was, very much an online presence. Do you think that especially as SoFi and others are starting to
Yeah.
acquire banks, that we're going to start to see more of kind of that fintech name associated with a place in which you can deposit your capital instead of just borrowing?
Yeah. And I think that's it. So yes. And I think that goes back to, I think those worlds, I think we knew originally those worlds were going to collide, right? Because
The lines are
yeah,
blurring.
I mean, it is the same. It's the same or similar population. You know, can you offer a product that feels new, feels fresh? It's not the, in some individuals' mind, it's not this antiquated, banking system, but it's similar, right? So I think
Mhm.
they continue to blend. They're already blending, as we mentioned, but I think it gets closer as we go through. And you're seeing it now, right? You're seeing, lenders picking up the fintech lenders picking up second and or third products, and they're not new products, right? Where, you look at the online installment lending, and that unsecured personal loan really blew up again. Not that it was new, but now you're seeing them go into subprime cards, definitely not new. Auto refinance, auto lending, like things that aren't new. So I think there is this realization that, one, to exist, you want to capitalize on your marketing expense. I would love to offer a second product to a consumer I already paid to market to, which they have to do. But two, you really just want to get down that same natural evolution, that same path. How can I have larger wallet share than I have today?
Makes a lot of sense, right? Like it's a it's a new coat of paint on the same thing, right? Like we're going to continue to see that growth. What do you see the kind of the future of fintech looking like? Do you think it continues down this same path? Are there any major hurdles or hairpin turns ahead that that we should be thinking about as we look at fintech?
I think if in the world that I'm mostly in, which is their servicing space,
Mm,
I think we're hitting, as it's become, it's not new right now, right? It's been out for a while, and there's some entities that are getting really mature. Uh, I think we're going to start to see this larger investment in this servicing side of it. How do we prepare for downturn? Some of them have already navigated through, but that there's more coming behind it. So do they have the systems and infrastructure? And with that startup mentality that they had in the evolution of it, or the first couple of years, you had to focus on the top of the funnel. You had to get out there. You needed wallet share. You needed marketing, and servicing was always, tomorrow we'll invest into servicing. And I think that as it's really matured and at scale, I think we're going to see much larger investment in infrastructure and servicing systems, digital. They're all going towards now, as most companies are. So
mhm.
I think you start to see a heavier investment. We're already seeing, which I love to see, you're seeing the fintech draw from banks, that you're seeing senior leadership move over. So I think you're going to start to see, how can we make sure the servicing book can really work, can operate? Can we meet increased regulation? Does it more than just look and feel like a bank? Does it operate like one? Is it controlled like one? That's going to be both the focus and the hurdle for some, because in some cases there's work to do. That's just the reality of it.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I do have one other question for you. And with your experience, not just in the fintech, but kind of the collection side, and then the servicing, which we all know, also a lot ties back to the kind of the debt collection process and managing those receivables. But are you finding that the fintechs, as they've developed their lending platforms, have collections baked into the primary platform, or is it like the banks and it's still kind of, I don't want to call it an afterthought because that's not the right terminology, but it's kind of like this separate piece
Yeah.
on the side, right? They're running a total secondary system for these things that have charged off or are distressed as it relates to those performing
Yeah.
portfolio accounts.
Uh, this has actually been the past 2 years. I was telling people that, it was kind of came out of COVID, but it starting around that time, primarily because of repurpose of funds.
Mhm.
Uh, for a lot of them, they were just adding on to their CRM, whatever
Okay.
their loan servicing system was, whether that be a Salesforce or similar, whatever the core CRM was, they were also using in most cases for collections. And because of that, there was a lot of holes. There's data capture challenges. There's you want to get into digital. You want to do a more expansive segmentation. I want to have an A/B test. Things just started to get a little bit more challenging. So
Annotations. Yeah.
I think because of where they were in the evolution, you were not getting a collection system as part of your stack as a fintech and new lender. You're going to use what you had, which would be whatever CRM you had, and you're going to use it for as long as you can. Now it's reaching a point where I don't think there's not a wide number of CRMs who do the full stack, the asset servicing, the collection. So we are now seeing a lot of them look to external parties. Can I get a traditional collection or recovery management system? Because they want to manage they want to manage a more complex strategy. I don't just want to sell. I don't just want to
Mhm.
do recovery and placements. I want to do a blend of both. I would like legal. And that's where I do think, go back to where we thought this was repeatable. It wasn't just repeatable from my fintech experience. These are things the banks have worked on for years.
Sure.
And I don't think this is going to be too different. I think you're going to see, and we're already seeing, your core servicing system and what else do I need to manage and run my collections and recovery? And that's happening now. And it's been a huge shift the past 2 years with the lenders we've been working with, which I think is a good thing. And I think for those on the buyer side, those in the agencies, the more closely that gets looks and feels like banks, the more likely it is the asset you're getting looks and feels like a bank, performs like a bank, the back end looks closer. So I think it's better.
Predictability being improved.
Yeah, and that's it. And if everyone is comfortable with it, I think it helps us all, and it helps the fintechs, right? You don't want to be that different in the back end of things.
Michael, I really appreciate your point of view on everything. I know every conversation I have with you, I learn. And honestly, this is one of those few discussions where I just really didn't have any notes because I knew that I had 1,000 questions to ask you. And you've always been really great about helping me to better understand kind of that fintech space and how it differs and where these things come together. I look forward to doing hopefully some webinars and some other things with you in the near future because you're just a wealth of knowledge. And I love the way that you talk about these things with such passion. And I know that a lot of that comes from experience and having the same challenges thrown at you and having to find new and creative ways to constantly find solutions to the nuances between the challenges that may be somewhat similar between your clients or organizations, but every individual problem has some specific nuances. And I think the way that you and your team have looked at the details of those nuances has really been incredible. For those of you that are watching, if you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask Michael and I, feel free to leave them in the comments here on LinkedIn and YouTube. We'll be happy to answer those questions for you. If you have any additional topics that you'd like to see us cover or guests that you'd like to see me interview, feel free to leave those comments below as well. In the short term, Michael, I really look forward to seeing you at whatever the next upcoming conference is. And just thank you so much for coming on and having a chat with me today.
No, thank you for this. Thank you for, this whole forum is awesome. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk to you soon and thank you, everybody.